Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
The Bears.
Because of the way they play the nickel corner here, and the nickel corner plays 88-85% of the snaps. He's got to be like part linebacker.
The Bears.
When you're in a scouting room, there's going to be differences of opinion.
The Bears.
Once coaches get involved, of course, they've got their own opinions about what fits best for what they want to do, and that could be drastically different than what the scouts say.
Well, you're looking at traits, and number one, he tested very, very well.
The Bears.
One thing good about Kevin, he's been with two other organizations, as well as being the commissioner of the Big Ten. He's been around.
The Bears.
With Greg Olson, Jerry didn't want to get rid of him. I didn't want to get rid of him. Nobody wanted to get rid of him. One guy wanted to get rid of him, Mike Martz, because Mike Martz didn't know what the hell to do with him. We tried to talk Lovey out of hiring Mike Martz for a month and a half. He's playing zone, but number one, he doesn't get enough depth with the drop. But who the hell's going? How many times does a 305, 310-pound defensive tackle drop into coverage, especially in a key situation?
The Bears.
Greg, why are teams wrong on quarterback evaluation so often?
Number one, it's a hard position to evaluate. There's probably not as many real good quarterback evaluators as there needs to be.
The Bears. The Bears. The Bears.
Welcome, everyone, to a fresh edition of GTF Gabriel Talks Football, and we have great news for you today. It was announced a little over an hour ago that the Chicago Bears have a brand new head coach. And Greg Gabriel is here to break it all down. Greg, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. I'll be honest. I got up real early, had to do some reports, and I had a doctor's appointment I had to get to that was early. So I get back from that. I think, well, I'm going to be up late watching Notre Dame tonight. So I turn on the inauguration stuff so I can just, because it's on every channel, so you got no choice. So I'm watching that, and that's always boring as hell anyway. And I fall asleep, and then I wake up, and it's like all hell broke loose on X that, like 15, 16 minutes before, Johnson had agreed to terms to be with the Bears.
Pretty amazing, isn't it? It was, I think Adam Schefter was the first to break the news.
I'm surprised Glazer didn't, only because he's, he's close with polls.
Yeah. Schefter wrote, bear down. Chicago is finalizing a deal to hire Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson as its next head coach. Sources tell ESPN Bears are getting their man. And Tom Pelissero went on WSCR radio, and he applauded the way the Chicago Bears went about getting their man. They knew Ben Johnson was their number one candidate, but they had all this time thinking that the Lions potentially could go to the Super Bowl, and so they kept busy by getting information from over a dozen potential candidates. Do you agree with Pelissero that the Bears did this the right way?
I said it the last time we did a show, and I've said it all the time. So all they had was time. Mm-hmm. Why don't you use that time wisely? The way the rules changed, it was set up so that you could interview a lot of people. And the league actually changed the rules to favor the coaches on the good teams, because they were losing out on jobs. People would be in a hurry to hire a coach. And so they changed these rules. Part of it was just the interview process, when you could interview, who you could interview, etc. The only guys who you didn't have to follow the rules with were guys like Vrabel, because, and McCarthy's the same thing, they didn't have a job. Mm-hmm. So you could talk to them in person. You didn't have to. They did a Zoom call with Vrabel. I think that was never really a strong guy on their list, even though he maybe should have been. They probably had guys prioritized. But part of the, when you do all this stuff, a lot of it's intel. Find out about certain teams the way they do things, start a book on other young coaches, because sooner or later you're going to be looking for coaches down the road, whether Ryan Poles is here or somewhere else. So it's a smart thing to do. The intel can be very, very helpful down the road. Some people think, well, they're going to hire all these guys as assistant coaches. That's not the way it works. Like everybody said, well, Ron Rivera is going to be the DC. No, looks like Dennis Allen's going to be the DC. And why is that? It's because you can't tell a coach that's the guy you're hiring. And when he's being interviewed, that's like the biggest thing you're talking about. Who the hell's your staff?
Right.
And with a guy like Ben Johnson, it's real important that he has a solid defensive coordinator. With a guy like Glenn, who will end up either in New York or New Orleans, it's real important that he has a solid offensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Well, Diana Rossini, I believe, is reporting that Ben Johnson is assembling an all-star type coaching squad.
Yeah, I saw that too. Well, I got a feeling who one's going to be, but I texted him and I posted it. I think if Tanner Eggstrand does not get promoted to OC in Detroit, and it's already been reported that he'll be on the list, that's a strong, I would think, a strong candidate to come here. As you know, but we never said that I talked to him a few weeks ago about that, and he said, well, I think it's a little too early to talk about that. And for people who don't know, Tanner and I worked together in the XFL. He was our offensive coordinator in 2020 in DC. Pep was the head coach. So I know Tanner very, very well, very smart. I just sent him a text right before we got on the air, but I haven't heard anything back yet.
I'm sure he's probably talking to his agent right now as they're finalizing deals to move to Chicago.
And Trace Armstrong wasn't the. I got to throw that one out pretty soon as I get off of this show here.
Who is Ben Johnson's agent? Do you know?
Rick Smith, right here in Chicago.
Oh, that's right, the Highland Park guy. Yeah. So,
and Rick. Actually, Rick and Mike McCartney were partners in Priority One. And then Mike got the deal to go to where he's at Vayner Sports to run all football operations for that agency. And so he left 3 years ago. But he's been partners with Rick for a long time. Rick's a really good guy. I did not know until I saw, the tweet the other day that he had made the change, because he had Richmond Flowers before, who was not, for lack of a better term, in the same league with the top coaching guys.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And, as long as we're saying that, let's say that article on ESPN was a total horseshit hack piece.
The one written by Kalen Kayer?
Yes. Total. I mean,
why?
Hey, like it or not, that's the way business is in the National Football League. There's only a handful, literally a handful, of top coaching front office agents. They're not very. You can count them. There's Bob Lamont. There's Armstrong. There's Jimmy Sexton. Brian Awalt gets a few. Rick Smith gets a few, but it's really very, very small. So, because it's a specialty business, it's not like the player business.
Right.
And so, I mentioned in a post the other day, Kansas City. Everybody in Kansas City except Nagy's got Bob Lamont. Have you ever heard of anybody make a stink in Kansas City about it? No, because it's not a big deal. That's the way it is.
Right. By the way,
who gets Bob Lamont these clients? Andy Reid. Hey,
I want to continue on that.
When Veach needs a guy to do his contract, call him out. He'll take care of it for it.
Excellent. I just want to let people in the chat know that I banned Don Burr. His comments, I mean, he comes in here and shits all over the Bears, saying, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, get the hell out of Detroit. We don't want you anymore. This is after he spends the entire season bragging about how great those guys are, how great the Lions are. And then on Saturday night after the Lions lost, we did a special broadcast dedicated to Don, but he didn't show up. So the first day he shows up is here throwing stones at what the Bears are doing. So he's not welcome at the bar room anymore. That's it. Fuck you, Don Burr.
Uh-oh. All those pissed.
I am pissed. Don't come in here and shit on our day of victory.
It's your bar.
That's right. I wish I was a bigger guy, a bigger bouncer type. Anyway, back to the article. I don't think Kalen Caher said that was that was a bad process. She wrote that other people thought it was a bad process because
but then there was anonymous sources, and whenever I see the anonymous sources, it's a hit piece. Name the people if you're going to start doing that, because then it becomes very skeptical to me. And like I say, I know this business, and I know the people. Eugene Parker, the late Eugene Parker, and I were very close friends. One of the best agents ever. He had Devin. He's had other Bears. I mean, he had some great clients. He died a few years ago from cancer. His son took over his business. But anyway, he and I talked about, the coaching business. He says, I can't do that. Why not? As good as you are. He goes, because it's a conflict to me.
Okay.
He goes, I can't have a player and then have a coach, and the coach has got to cut my player.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense.
So that's why it gets in that some of these guys have very few players because of that. Jimmy Sexton used to have a bunch of players, but not anymore, because he's got, now most of his coaching group is college coaches. But there was at one time when Jimmy Sexton had 80% of the SEC head coaches. Jimmy Sexton was the SEC. He had more power in the SEC than the commissioner did, because he controlled all the football coaches.
That's wild. Well, and it's gotten tougher for player agents, because there have been a lot of celebrities and former players who have now gotten into the agency business. And the only last part of agents that's available without the intrusion of these outside elements, so to speak, is coaches. And there, as you have said repeatedly on this show, there are just about a half dozen or so of these agents who specialize in coach and getting jobs for coaches, whether it's head coaches, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, and it's become kind of a specialty business, right?
Yeah, no, it is. And I, by the way, I got a text back from Tanner. Yeah, I'll just say what he got. He said, "Thanks, Greg. We'll see how it shakes down." And,
okay.
And I had mentioned his name on X a little while ago, and and he said, "Appreciate that for pushing my name." So.
Yeah. Don Burr just keeps coming back. I just got to keep banning him. I don't know how he's figured out some workaround, but away he goes. Okay. So what about Ben Johnson? Everyone is concerned about, does he really have the leadership skills to work?
Okay. We don't know. I mean, people in household know a lot more than we do. They sat down. I must have been asked 100 times. Who do you want? Who's your favorite? I always answer it the same way. I don't have one. I got a list of 5 or 6. Vrabel was on that list.
Right.
McCarthy wasn't on it at first, but then, because who knew he was going to be available? But when he came available, I put him on there. David Shaw was on there. And people don't, and I'm probably the lone David Shaw, flag bearer, because a lot of people just don't know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
But doing this as long as I do, I know who he is. And I don't know him. I've met him, but I've watched him coach, and I know people who have been on his staff. So I knew a lot about him. I knew a real lot about him. In fact, if there was a guy that was brought in that they wanted to be a coach here as an assistant so he could get back into the NFL, it would be, I'd love to see that, because he's a hell of a coach. And he spent 9 years in the league coaching. His dad was an NFL lifer,
Mm-hmm.
coached forever. Spent a lot of time with the Vikings.
Do you put a lot of weight on coaches who come from coaching bloodlines?
Yeah, because you grew up in it, so you understand it. When Dad does it, my dad was a contractor, so I understood a lot of that stuff growing up.
Okay.
It becomes part of your life, and right at an early age.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how little boys are, I want to grow up and be like Dad. And
Yeah.
so they get into it. They play the game, and then they get into it if they're not good enough to play at the next level. So that's what happened with David. But to get back to the leadership thing, I mean, that's part of that's the interview process. So you're talking to them about certain situations. You could throw situations that happened in Hallis Hall this year and happened in Hallis Hall last year. Use the thing with Williams, the defensive coordinator who they let go. You bring up that situation. How would you react to that? How are you going to handle a situation like that?
Right.
And then you had the HR problem with the running back coach at the end of the year. They had to let him go at the end of last year. So then things like that. So you try to get a feeling from him as to exactly, if these situations come up, how he's going to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
But really, one of the most, he can coach offense. He's proven that. That's the easy part. Can he lead both sides of the ball? Can he lead a whole team and be a strong influence on them? And I would think, working for Dan Campbell the last 3 years, and he's actually was with Campbell for a few years in Miami, knowing that personality and knowing how Campbell leads, that had to take some notes. I mean, that's only the natural thing to do. But again, okay, who's going to be his coaches with him? DC. Okay, right now they're saying Dennis Allen. Now, we got to clarify this. They can say Dennis Allen is going to be the DC and Tanner Eggstrom is going to be the OC. And I'm just throwing the name out for
Sure.
Tanner, just for thing. By rule, they got to go through the whole process like they do with a head coach for any of the coordinator positions. But is it scammed a little bit? Probably, because a coach can hire who he damn feels like hiring to fill those important roles.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be somebody he already knows, already has a strong relationship with. It's not going to be some stranger off the street.
Right.
So he relates that when he's in the interview process. Ryan Poles goes, okay, who's your defensive staff? Who do you got in mind? And there's some times where you can go, you might have 3 defensive line coach names, because what if something happens, you can't get number 1. So that'll be, then he'd obviously go to the first guy first, and a lot of time, I'm going to say with a good percentage, staff's already done. Not officially, but they got to go through the charade. But I'm going to say a lot of it's done.
Interesting. Dan Pompei, who I know is a writer you hold in high esteem, has
one of the best.
Tweeted out the following. Let me go with this one first. What can the Bears expect from Ben Johnson? Some things that stand out from my time around him and the Lions. He's low on ego, but big on analytics. He thinks creatively and will emphasize the run game and protections. Johnson will have a vision for what he wants to do with Caleb. And then he adds, he is likely to empower Caleb offensively. He gave Goff authority with protection adjustments that not all quarterbacks have and eliminated plays that Goff didn't love. Also, Bears will be going for it on fourth down. Johnson was pushing for that before he had authority and before it became popular. Any thoughts on what Dan wrote there?
No, and that's really become the norm around the league. Mm-hmm. I don't know who was first at it, but you see it. When you cross the 50-yard line and you got like fourth and a yard and a half, you're going for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Unless your defense really sucks. I mean, but chances are you go for it. And teams that have a strong quarterback, and Caleb's, I mean, he's not tall.
Mm-hmm.
How about this? And we might have mentioned this once before. Jalen Hurts looks big, right?
Right.
Jalen Hurts is smaller than Caleb.
Really? He's shorter than Caleb?
He's an eighth of an inch shorter.
Is that right?
And they're about the exact same weight.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Hey, I wanted to ask you this question regarding Caleb's height. Do you stay away from offensive linemen who are 6'5" and taller? There's a kid out of some small college who's got some great athletic skills, but he's like 6'9". He's a left tackle.
Well, you don't want a 6'9" guard.
Yeah, no, but he's a tackle.
So what? No,
Okay.
I mean, you go back to Philly. Look at the size of those elephants.
Mm-hmm.
They're all 6'6".
Yeah. And Jalen doesn't have any trouble, although Jalen's passing has gone downhill, but that could be because he's lost Shane Steicher, his previous offensive coordinator who worked magic.
No, but hey, they're playing in the NFC Championship game. Mm-hmm. He's been playing dinged up. He looks taller because he's got long legs, and so long legs make you look taller than you really are. And Caleb's got shorter legs and a longer torso.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, when you look at the arm length, Caleb's arms are longer and his hands are bigger. I mean, the only thing, his legs are the only thing that is probably shorter.
Yeah. So Scalatora is asking, do you see a lot more play action from Caleb this upcoming season with Ben Johnson? I'd love it if we did.
Probably. He's gonna play into Caleb's strengths. But the first thing you got to do is take care of the line. Somebody asked me on X just a little while ago, right before we started, well, what do you see him doing in the draft? Yada yada. I go, I can't answer that. And I'll get to it. You gotta let's see what they do in free agency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Probably, yeah. There's no doubt that the urgency to find better players for the offensive and defensive line is not going to change, whoever the coach is. And with Ben Johnson, it really puts more of an emphasis at building a really stellar offensive line.
Let me ask you this, because I'm sure when a guy comes in to interview,
mm-hmm.
it's a two-way interview. Ben Johnson's interviewing Ryan Poles, and Ryan Poles is interviewing Ben Johnson.
That's the way it should be, sure.
Okay, so, Ryan, what are you doing for me? That line sucks. I've seen it.
What's your plan? Yeah.
Right, and it had a mesh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would love to be a fly in the wall to hear what Ryan poses. And do you think that Ben, would it be fair or disrespectful for Ben to ask something like, "Why have you ignored the offensive line as much as you have?"
I honestly believe, and I'm not trying to be naive because I've been doing this too long, that he thought it was better than it was.
Yeah,
I
agree.
And reality is, I just wanted to get my thoughts straight there for a second.
Sure thing.
Is not one game all year did they play with the offensive line that he thought was going to be the starting offensive line. Not one game in 17.
Yeah, how sad is that? When the injury bug hits, everything is out the window.
Okay, now I look at my Buffalo Bills, who are playing in the AFC Championship game. They've lost one game in 2 years by a starter on the offensive line. One game.
Wow, that is probably the biggest reason why they will go to the Super Bowl and beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Am I right or wrong?
Well, I think they're going to beat Kansas City. I think it's their year.
Wow.
I wish the game was in Buffalo, but they have gone in. They've beaten Kansas City. They just don't beat them in the playoffs.
Yep.
So I mean, they beat them this year easily. Game was in Buffalo.
Yeah.
But I was scared of that game yesterday only because I didn't think they matched up. Football's a matchup game. It's not necessarily the best team. It's how you match up against the team you're playing. I did not see them matching up good against the Ravens because the Ravens are, a power team up the middle. And Buffalo's defensive line is like Chicago's defensive line. It's not, the tackles. They aren't real big guys. And you look at the size of the guards that Baltimore have. I mean, the one guy's that kid from Minnesota, University of Minnesota, that was in the draft 2 years ago. Shit, he's about 370. And the other guy's pushing 330 or something like that. They got some really big guys on the interior of their offensive line. So I just didn't see that. And then they got Henry, who was, he's a freaking offensive lineman himself that can run fast. And so I just didn't see that one working. But it did. And they said it's because of I'll say the abuse they took in the media and stuff, and about how the defense was weak up the middle, that these guys were fired up for that game. And Baltimore came a drop pass away from tying that game. But when that happened, I'm thinking, there's a minute 40 left. You gave Josh plenty enough time. I mean, I've seen him against Kansas City do it in 20 seconds.
Yeah, indeed. I want to talk to you about some of the players on offense and whether they are a good fit or bad fit, or we don't know yet. So let's start with DeAndre Swift. Do you see a role for him?
He had his best season under Johnson in Detroit, statistically.
Oh, really? I thought it was with Philadelphia.
No. Well, okay. He was the running back free agent 2 years ago, and he goes to Philly.
Right.
They let him go. They signed Montgomery.
Yeah.
Okay, but you go look up his numbers. He was a big part of that. He's already paid for him.
Yeah. Well, and I can see, they had their eye on Jahmyr Gibbs, and boy, were they absolutely right about that kid. So they brought in the power back in Montgomery, and they had their eye on the speedster out of Alabama, Gibbs, and away they went. They had a great offensive attack. I just wonder, how does Gibbs does not compare favorably with Swift does not compare favorably with Gibbs. Am I right or wrong?
Well, no, you're right. I've said it several times. I think Swift is a space player, and you try to get him out in space and make plays for him, but you need an inside banger,
right?
And that's what Johnson is. But is he? Is that the right guy? Is that an area they got an upgrade still? They're not going to get every need taken care of this offseason. But the first thing the coaching staff is going to do is they're going to start breaking down the tape and saying, he stays, he goes, he stays, he goes, and there's going to be sometimes, Ryan's going to have to say, no, he got to stay,
Right. I get you.
But, and part of it's money, but I think, I've been thinking that now. You might say I'm wacky, but I'm trying to be, me, I'm trying to be positive. Okay, so you're going to Amagaji. We already know the traits are fantastic. He's athletic, he's big. Really hurt himself. Basically, he's going to be a rookie all over again next year because he never had a camp. So I'm thinking, what's he like? And then it hit me last week when I'm watching Philly.
Uh-huh.
And Philly's got the big Australian left tackle who never played football until they drafted him. They drafted him off a workout. That's it. He was a rugby player. Okay, it took them better than 2 years before they even wanted to put him in a game. But now he's one of the best tackles in the league because he had. Now, Amagaji's not as big as that guy. He's a little bit shorter, but same type of length, same type of girth. I'm not saying he's going to turn out to be that guy, but you're going to have the coach look at it, whoever the line coach is, and that's going to be one of his most important hires. Who's his offensive line coach? And really look at that guy and say, I can do it or I can't do it. And part of it may be the coach talking to Amagaji, get a feel for what's in his brain.
Yeah. Well, hopefully what's in his brain is a killer mentality. I can't wait to see how this guy either progresses or doesn't, because we need we need him to progress.
He is a piece that is potentially a piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
But it's to be determined, because these guys are this coaching staff will have a lot to say on what they do. It always, when you turn over coaches, it always does happen. Got to ask you, what did you think yesterday as far as head coach? Who do you think the coach was going to be? Not who you hoped. Who do you think? I know you've always hoped all along it would be Johnson. Right.
Mike McCarthy is, because they flew him up in a private jet. They were paying him all due respect. And I really mean this, due respect. I've been critical of McCarthy, but he's won in the National Football League, and he deserves respect for that. And given the team's place with discipline, I thought they probably wanted a Vrabel/McCarthy type, and McCarthy was available. The one thing that was interesting is that McCarthy's name is not up for any other interviews. And so that made me think, is this thing?
No, he's not Dallas, New Orleans.
New Orleans, but there's no interview scheduled or anything like that. And by the way,
he's supposed to be brought in tomorrow or Wednesday.
Oh, okay. Chubbs, thank you very much. He says, let's effing go. A new era has begun. Hope has been restored. So why'd you ask me that question about?
Because, there's been so much noise recently that it's a done deal in Vegas. And the only national guy that kept saying, no, it's not, is Schefter.
Mm-hmm.
Schefter, and Schefter said, you got to look at what's been going on there.
Mm-hmm.
He's right now, he goes, not including who he's going to hire. There's 3 general managers and 3 head coaches that are getting paid that aren't there.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, Gruden's getting paid $10 million a year for not being there.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, how stable is that to go to? He goes, look at their roster. It's awful.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody else, no, Tom Brady's got this done. And then, Tom Brady's talking to Johnson on the field before the game.
Oh, I was infuriated by that.
So there's all that. So I kept thinking, wow, okay. Because my thinking, you know what my philosophy is for the draft, and that is hope for the best case scenario, prepare for the worst case scenario, and if you can accept the worst case scenario, you're in good shape.
Oh, wow.
Right? You've heard me say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm thinking, okay, they're not going to get him. And so what's the next best scenario? And to me, McCarthy was one, but the other guy that just kept piquing my interest is Monken. I just, watch the Ravens closely, watch some of their games, talk to people who've been around them, and nobody says a bad thing. But the only negative you can have is that he's going to be, where he is 58, to be 59 for the season next year. Then somebody brought up, yeah, but Arians was 60 when he first got a head coaching job.
There you go.
Yeah, so that's where I was going. I had that post yesterday. I said, here's what I predict will happen. Johnson will go to Vegas. The local radio will MF the Bears for screwing it up.
Mm-hmm.
They'll hire the guy and say it was their guy. That guy will turn out pretty good. Johnson will be so-so, and the radio guys will go, well, this was always our guy to begin with. Because they don't care what, they're not held accountable for what they said yesterday. They're only, it's just what they say today.
Indeed. Chubbs with another $5 donation. Thank you very much, Chubbs. And you go to the front of the line. But with this comment, who was buying the Raiders? I was never believing that. Why would you hold out last year to take the worst job you could take in years? They have no quarterback.
Well, it was the Tom Brady thing.
Yes.
And
because
so,
Tom was wooing him.
That's annoyed in Jesus Christ and coming down off the mountain, he's going to solve all the problems. Mm-hmm. But you had to, when there's so many national people that kept going, yeah, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And like I said, the only guy that wasn't was Schefter.
Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool. We got another donation from Matthew Fochese. He says, Cabes, what's your take on Scattaboo, the running back who in postseason play captured everyone's imagination? I'm intrigued by him.
He's a backup.
Really?
Oh, I don't think he's run very fast.
No, I bet you he's going to run a 4.6 at the combine.
4.6? Shit. You strap jets to his ankles, he might get 4.6. Come on, he'll be in the 4.7s unless he drops some weight. Now, he's a good player.
Yeah, he is.
There's no question he's a good player, and a great player in the Big 12, where it's not that hard for offensive players to put up big numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But now you got to translate that to the National Football League. And does he have the traits to do that in the National Football League?
Oh, interesting.
He's got a heart this big.
Yeah, sure does.
He is going to will himself to be a good player.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see him being a starter. Well, first of all, there's very few starting backs anymore, bell cows.
Right.
Everybody plays a rotation. So he is a complement to, he could be your big bull inside where you got the other guy playing in space.
Mm. So he could be the David Montgomery to DeAndre Swift's Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, no, I don't think he's as fast as Monty, but Monty wasn't exactly a speed demon. Monty was like a 4.58, something like that when he came out.
Right.
But he's quick. He's real quick for like 10 yards.
Yeah.
And got real quick feet. No, hey, the guy's a great football player. I'm not taking that away from him. I'm just saying that his traits for the National Football League don't translate to being a star.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Chubbs with another $2. He must have won the lotto. Chubbs says, nothing wrong with a utility guy in the 5th round, and that's exactly where I would draft him, 5th or 6th round.
No, exactly. He's a day 3 running back.
Right. I see a lot of mock drafts, but he's a day 2, and I'm like, what? What are
no,
you guys
he's not a day 2. Go look around the league and see how many day 3 running backs are starting. Besides a shitload.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Moondog asked, does Johnson use a fullback? I don't know. I don't think he does.
Baltimore does. I don't think Detroit does.
No, I don't think so.
The one thing, the guy who's probably having orgasms down the street from you in Arlington Heights is Cole Kmet.
Oh, yeah. Go get that tissue out.
Because you see the way he uses a tight end.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. That Sam Laporta catch in the end zone, that one-handed catch. But it goes beyond that. He just knows that it's a vital part of today's offenses. Work the middle of the field with your big tight end target. So hopefully Cole will be up to the task and has put behind him all the frustrations he's had the last few years. I'm actually worried about Cole Kmet because he's been so frustrated with this organization. Do you think a move like this will bring up the spirits of people like Cole Kmet and Jalen Johnson, who have lost so much with this organization? You think their spirits are going to be bolstered by all this?
I can't speak for the defensive guys, but the offensive guys, yeah.
They should be, right? If not, then get them the hell out.
Hey, I mean, you saw the catfish call with Caleb, what he wanted. I mean, everybody saw that.
That was awesome. That was awesome. Yeah. And,
how about everybody panicking because he had a cast on his arm the other day, and it turned out to be just he had a little cyst removed.
That's exactly right. The 312 says, Greg, who do you like in the offensive lineman in this draft? He likes Banks, but a lot of mocks see Will Campbell coming to the
good question. Right now, today, I could change my mind. I don't think either one is a top 10 pick.
I agree with you.
Okay, and here's why. Banks, how tall is he?
6.
We don't know how tall he is. Nobody's got a measurement because he's an underclassman. He hasn't been measured. He's listed as being 6'4" and like 320. He looks every bit of that. I'm hoping he's like 6'4 1/4 or something like that. If he's 6'3 3/4, he's a guard. And he's got to have, I mean, if he's like 6'4 1/4 and he's got 34.5-inch arms, he can play tackle. But if it's shorter than 6'4 and 34-inch arms, 33.5-inch arms, he's playing inside. There's one starting left tackle in the league that measures under 6'4", and that's the Bills guy, and he's 6'3 7/8.
Okay.
And he's got 35.5-inch arms.
Well,
so measurements count, especially at tackle. And that's my only concern. So if he's a guard, now we'll find out in a month, 6 weeks, how big he really is. And then that could help. Now his play kind of fell off late, but in fairness to him, he hurt a knee in one game, sat out 2, then came back and played in the playoffs and stuff. But I don't think he was 100% because he wasn't playing. He wasn't as nifty in those games as he was earlier in the year. But you got to take that into consideration that he was hurt. Now with the LSU guy, he was 6'5 7/8 or 6'5 3/4 in the spring because he was going into a senior year, so they could get a measurement on weighed like 320, 318. But his arm length was just 33. Now you've heard me say 1,000 times, I don't trust those spring arm lengths, but they ain't growing 1.5 inches.
That's for sure.
Okay, Taylor Decker, tell you a story. And and with that guy, with the LSU guy, this could play into it only because of Taylor Decker. Okay, Taylor Decker. I remember I was talking to Howie Roseman because I used to work for Philly, so I talked to Howie periodically. And this was when Taylor was a senior at Ohio State. They said, "How you like him?" He goes, "Oh, his arms are too short." I said, "Howie, I don't think so." I said, "His tape's really good." And he goes, "His arms are too short. They're 32.5." Okay, that's the spring arm length. So he was like throwing them out the window. Okay. So what's he have at the combine? 33.5. So the combine one is accurate. Okay, they're very precise on how they do it. So At 33 and a half, you're right at the minimum that you want for a left tackle in the league. You prefer longer, but he's been Detroit's starting left tackle.
Okay.
So if this guy, and a pretty darn good one.
Yeah, for sure.
So Johnson knows that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if he sees Taylor Decker in this guy, well, yeah, then it's a possibility. But right now, and you look at, and Poles is a big, big believer in length.
Mm-hmm.
I just, where they're sitting now at 10, I don't see an offensive lineman worthy of that pick. It would not shock me if there's not been an offensive lineman taken. And so then it's two things. You either take the best defensive lineman, and there'll be some good defensive linemen there, or you drop down a little bit, pick up an extra pick, and now you're taking an offensive lineman at a little better value.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that because a lot of people have been asking about trading down. Do you think this is a good draft to trade out of that 10th position and move down?
Well, it's you don't trade down unless, I mean, you plan to.
Right.
You can go, okay, and then let's say for some reason Graham falls in your plate.
Yeah, you got to take him.
You're going to take him. Okay. Okay. Well, you don't have to. I mean, assuming everything checks out, the medical checks out, and everything else. So, that. But I figured he's a 6th, 7th type pick.
Mm-hmm.
Probably you're looking at a good edge. Again, wait, and I use Dane's stuff right now just to see what he thinks, because everything, what you see now and what you're going to see in 2 months are totally different.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to get, coaches are going to get involved starting in March, actually starting at the combine. You're going to get the verified measurables. You're going to get the medical. And that can change a whole lot on what the thinking is. But with the quarterbacks, it's the coaches that really push these guys up. Perfect example was last year. At this time last year, who thought 6 quarterbacks were going in the top 12 besides
Great
nobody?
Point. Yeah, great point. Yeah.
Okay, so, but now when the coaches get involved, it's like, we got to have a guy, and if we don't get him now, we aren't getting him. So you want, I don't personally see a quarterback in this draft better than the 6 guys that went in the top 12 last year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sanders and Ward are good players. They're not as good as those guys. You might be able to, give an argument for Penix, but Penix was pretty damn good at Washington. And I'm just using his name because he had such a horrible injury history, two ACLs when he was at Indiana. So, the Giants got to stretch and take a quarterback. Somebody else got to stretch and take a quarterback. And then you got to hope that, I was having a conversation with Kuiper, and he goes, who's the third quarterback? And he's got Jackson Dart, the Ole Miss guy. So, that's probably a good name. And in fairness, I haven't studied the quarterbacks that much because Bears aren't going to take a quarterback.
No way.
So if that's the case, you need somebody to fall in love with him.
Mm-hmm. Yep, indeed. By the way, thank you, Stephen Broadhay, for the $10 donation. And I know that Chubbs has broken open that piggy bank. This is his 3rd or 4th donation. This one for $5. He says, sign the guard out of KC and the left tackle from Baltimore and draft an edge. You think any of those 2 guys are going to make it to free agency? I don't know what the KC's salary cap number is, but with Patrick Mahomes on the team, it can't be very healthy. And the left tackle, Ronnie Stanley from Notre Dame, he would be a great find for
interesting, because when I was talking, Kuiper's from Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a big Baltimore fan, and he knows that roster. He's thinking they might not bring him back.
Really?
Yeah, because he's had a lot of injuries. And I never looked at where you got to look is on put the guy's name in Pro Football Reference, and it has number of games played, games played, games started in each season.
Right.
And so that'd be an interesting little exercise. Just put
he missed two games this season because of a knee injury in week 2 and week 3. In
you can go down. You can scroll down a little bit, and I'll have it for each year, like games played 15, games started 10, or something like that.
Yeah,
you can do that with every single player in the league.
it's pretty cool. I'll look at that. But what do you think? You think Stanley could potentially make it to free agency?
He thought they could take. They got Rosengarten at the right tackle, or they drafted, and he's really. They think they could potentially move him to the left side and let Stanley walk. But they also got, they got 2 guards that are coming up. One, the left guard, I can't think of his name. He was originally a free agent coming out of college. And, interesting thing, too, because I'm looking at Washington's line. There's not a first-round pick on that whole line. And they got a pretty damn good line.
That frustrates me, man, when I see that.
No, really. I think Cosmo, the guy got hurt the other day. He's the highest. I think he was a 2. He might have been a late 1, but I think he's a 2.
That's wild. Yeah, Stanley, I can't find the option that you're saying with games and games started, but I do see this. Ronnie Stanley played 11. I mentioned 2024 and 2023. Now, in 2022, he missed 6 games. In 2021, he missed almost the entire season, as well as 2020. So he went through a period in 2020, 2021, and 2022 where he missed substantial time. So he is not the sturdiest of offensive linemen.
Well, durability is so you know what's going to happen. You sign a guy, and then if he can't play, and the Wolves are going to start howling.
Indeed.
Okay. Now, yesterday, it's interesting. A lot of people were Mekhi Becton is the guy you should go after. Right guard for Philly. He's a free agent who was a top 10 pick with the Jets 4 years ago. Really busted with the Jets. Had injury problems, and they drafted him to be the left tackle. Now he's playing right guard at Philly. He's with a good organization. And all of a sudden, he's a great player. I mean, the talent's always been there. Sometimes it's where you end up going.
All right.
So, again, that's a guy who's had injury history. So, I mean, you really got guys like that, you got to really look into. I know just from the one conversation I had with Ryan, especially if they get older, he's skeptical about paying them. Because, the theory is once you start breaking, you're always going to break. And look at that. And Tev is a testament to that. He's got 21 missed games in 4 years, plus the partial games. So it's really more like 24 missed games in 4 years.
Yeah. Sorry, Tevin. It was great having you around. You showed so much promise, but those injuries, you got to go. I got just off the track here, digression. Aaron Glenn, how much did he hurt his chances of being a head coach, or are you pretty certain he's going to be signing a contract?
Campbell's already put up the white flag. It says, I know I'm losing both of them. So, he did that today. So, and it like 3 hours later, he lost his OC to here. So, Glenn is in New York right now, and he's going to New Orleans if he gets out of the door in New York. I personally, throw out the fact that he's on defense, he might be the best candidate. And then guy's a hell of a coach. And when you listen to him talk, have you listened to him do anything?
I don't recall.
You want to get up and run through the wall. He can stir you up. This year, when you look, at one point there was 12 guys or 13 guys on IR. Brady was saying on the telecast it was like 15 now or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, Jesus, look at all the games they won. They only lost 2 games during the season. What it did is it caught up to them in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now you're playing a different brand of football once you get in the playoffs, and you got 14, 15 players out. How the hell are you supposed to match up?
Yep. Totally agree with that. Totally agree. We've got a lot of comments and questions that have been piling up. Creighton wants to know, do you know if Pep has been getting OC calls, Pep Hamilton?
I have not talked to Pep in a few weeks, so I don't know that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We captured a couple of these, but this one is interesting. It's interesting because
just my own little
thing on Pep.
connect the dots would be, if Tanner came here, it wouldn't shock me if Pep was coming too, because Pep was the head coach when Tanner was the OC in DC when we were all, you know, the same staff.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you think a guy like Pep Hamilton could be beneficial for Caleb Williams?
Oh, without question.
Really? Okay.
Pep's one of the best quarterback coaches around. Pure quarterback coaches.
Right, right.
You can argue about his offense or whatever, but I mean, he's the guy who really developed Andrew Luck and a few other guys. He's the guy, you know, he was the position coach.
Gotcha.
David Shaw was the head coach, and then Pep became the offensive coordinator. It was David's offense. Pep was calling it, and then Pep took bits and pieces of that and added to it. When Andrew Luck went to the Colts, got drafted by the Colts, the guy they hired to be the OC was Pep.
Okay.
So and then Luck really played in the same offense, like his last 2 years at Stanford, and then his first 4 years or so at Indy with Pep.
Interesting. Okay.
But Pep is so good at breaking things down.
Yeah.
You know, and technically, and I know, like, I went to a practice this summer because Pep was going to be there, you know, with the NFL Network. So go over there, and he comes over and he goes, guy's pretty friggin' good now.
Love it. I'd love to see Pep here. He's every time I see him in an interview or anything like that, he is somebody that you could tell this guy is a great coach. 3.5 Houston made me aware of this tweet from Josina Anderson. She wrote, developing. There are league sources. This was 3 hours ago or more. League sources who now believe Ben Johnson is deeply considering the head coach vacancy with the Bears per league source because of Ben Johnson's wife. And now that it's been announced, she retweeted it and saying, "Listen to your girl." Do you think a spouse could have a determining factor on where a coach is going to go? The women have that power too.
Well, you know, maybe she likes shopping on the strip. I don't know.
Yeah. It is interesting. I do believe, of course, it's a family decision. Anytime you're going to get a job, and
you know, where's she from? Maybe she's from here. Who knows?
Who knows exactly?
The commissioner's wife's from here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah,
I did not.
She's from here.
Look at that. We've talked about this a little bit, but if you want to kind of review for people who are just joining us as we're an hour into the show, Skeletor is asking, what kind of a defense, if Dennis Allen is the next DC, what kind of a defense should we expect?
I got to go back and look. He's done 3-4 and 4-3. I got to see what he did. He was, until he got elevated to the head coach at New Orleans a couple of years ago, he was the DC. I think he was pretty much 4-3.
Okay.
I just know he's highly respected. His defenses have always been good. It's just when he's been a head coach, he hadn't gotten the job done as head coach.
Chubb
But
says-
he's not a goofy talker like Flus.
Good. Chubb says that maybe Mrs. Ben Johnson just hates Detroit because it's a shit. Thank you, Chubb, for the great laugh. Cliff says, I was thinking the same thing. Michigan Avenue, baby. Michigan Avenue. That'll attract a lot of shoppers. Was it a mistake for James Daniels to be let go by Ryan Poles in free agency? And would Poles consider bringing James Daniels back, who has played
He's
the
hurt
right
too.
guard? Yeah, he's hurt
got a
too.
torn. He's coming off a torn Achilles.
Maybe he's a bargain. I doubt it.
I keep wanting to look at Detroit's line to see how they block.
Mm-hmm.
To see the reason Poles did not bring back Daniels really didn't have a lot to do with Daniels the person, and it had everything to do with Daniels the athlete. That knew they were going to go to an outside zone scheme, and that's like the direct opposite of what he's doing in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so he wasn't a scheme fit. You got to have athletic guys. So, and if you look at Detroit, their line's athletic. Mm-hmm. So it might be looking for the same type of guys.
OKC Bears boy says expect more man and blitz with Allen, aggressive defense. By the way, I got to shout out OKC Bear boy. He remembered that DeAndre Swift was actually traded by the Lions to the Eagles, and I think I found it here for confirmation. Yeah, the Eagles acquired Swift and a 2023 seventh rounder from the Lions for a fourth and a seventh. They moved down, so that was actually a trade for DeAndre Swift, who then went on to have his best season statistically with the Eagles.
What were his 22 stats in Detroit?
All right, let me look at them really quickly because I do remember they were pretty good. DeAndre Swift over on Pro Football Reference. All right, geez, I wish I could type.
What time's kickoff? 7:00 or 6:30?
I think it's 6:30.
Okay.
So in 2022, his last season with the Lions, he had 542 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns, and he caught 48 passes out of the backfield for almost 400 yards and another 3 touchdowns.
So he's a space player.
Yeah. With Philadelphia, he had over 1,000 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns. He's averaged
900. He had 900 here.
He had 959, right? He actually had his second best season in his career and scored the most touchdowns since his rookie year with the Lions. So it's going to be interesting. He's going to be a fascinating player to watch and see how Ben Johnson can get the most out of him. A couple of other questions I want to get in here before we get out of here. By the way, Keith Lutz, thank you for the $3 super stickers. You are the man. Keith Lutz must have won all of his bets this week, and he's always posting those. Regarding offensive lineman, Greg, is the value of Donovan Jackson instead of Banks or Campbell, is there value in maybe trading down and picking up Donovan Jackson instead of focusing on Banks and Campbell?
Is Donovan Jackson the left tackle for Ohio State?
No. I want to say, and I know somebody in the chat is going to get to it before.
The starting left tackle at Ohio State actually tore an ACL, and they moved the left guard. The left guard has been playing left tackle the whole second half of the season.
Donovan Jackson. Yeah, he's a 3-year starter at left guard.
Okay, he's 6'3.5", and he's playing, and he's at Ohio State, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, he's playing tackle. Been playing tackle half the year. To me, he's a second round pick. He's a guard. He's playing tackle because he has to play tackle.
Right, because Josh Simmons had the injury.
Simmons, right? In fact, Simmons, our buddy Dane had Simmons going here, in a
I saw that.
in a
Yeah.
mock. That ain't going to happen. He's coming off an ACL,
Yeah,
and
too risky.
especially after what happened with Amagaji, there ain't no way that's happening.
Yeah. What do you think about
you can? One thing you can be sure of with the draft picks this year,
Mhm.
they're going to be cleaner than a new baby's ass. I mean,
they better be. I love it. What do you think about this big guard, Austin Booker from Alabama? I mean, I saw that he weighs like over 350, but he's got quick feet. Do you think there might be room for him?
he's another guy that I think is a 2.
Mhm.
It's what does Johnson? What's he want from his offensive lineman?
Mhm.
You know, when
Right.
we find that out, that'll be a lot easier because then you could plug guys in and say fit, not fit, fit, not fit.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I'm just going, you know, if you look at Detroit's line, that's a pretty athletic line.
Yeah. Thank you, Bear in the UK, Tyler Booker, not Austin Booker.
No, we got Austin Booker already.
We got Austin Booker. Hopefully, what do you think about the prospects of Austin Booker developing into a top contributor to the Bears defense?
Oh, I think he was getting more play time as the season went on. He's got to get bigger. We knew that, you know, when they drafted him. I think he's got a bright future. I always think he's going to be a rotation guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's never. But I think at his best, he can be a 7 to 8 sack guy. Maybe a little better because once you get a lot stronger, I mean that's going to help because he's athletic as hell. He's just, you know, he's lean.
Indeed. J2K, whose opinion I respect dearly, he says Booker will look better in a Dennis Allen type of defense, and that's Austin Booker. So we'll see. We'll see. Tony the Pod Boss, haven't heard from him in a while. He says Josh Simmons from Ohio State is coming off an ACL injury. No,
he did it like mid-season.
Yeah,
and he's a good player. There's no question he's a good player. Yeah. The tackle, he played right and left tackle at Arizona, is really a good player, but he's probably a right tackle in the league. And, you know, so if you're going to draft a tackle, especially with having Wright already, you're going to be a left tackle type. But I really think they're going to try to chore up the inside.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. You got to start inside out. What are your thoughts about a rookie center? I'm not sure this class has a stellar center in it, but at this point, do you think
about the best guy was the Alabama kid? One scout I talked to had him like as a 5th rounder, but he's staying in school.
Okay.
A lot of good centers weren't centers. You move them.
That's right.
You know, my guy, I've mentioned him 1,000 times, playing in the East-West. Newman from Michigan State, who was a tackle at Holy Cross, left tackle at Holy Cross, played there 4 years, graduate transfer to Michigan State, played left guard, but when you watch the tape, he's making all the line calls.
Okay.
And I remember when I first said it, because I wrote him for one of the agents I worked for, and I said, you know, he's a starter at guard, but I may want to put him in center too, because just watching him, it's like he's directing traffic.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and if he went to Holy Cross, you know he's got a brain, because that's a really good school. He's 6'3" even, or 6'2" and 7/8, and he weighed 315. So, you know, we'll see what he is at the combine and at the East-West. Those players report on Friday at the East-West. But to me, he's a 3rd-round guy. But I really like him. He's one of my favorite. In fact, I was doing the Michigan defensive tackle. So I had, and I had to do a defensive end for Michigan, number 8 for next year. It was just yesterday. So I put on the Michigan State game to see how Newman did against the big tackle for Michigan State. Knocked him on his ass a couple times.
I love it.
I said, nobody mentions this guy's name, and all I see him do is fucking win.
OKC is asking, do you expect Pace to go to the East-West Shrine game or the Senior Bowl? I got to believe.
Now that the coach is done, yeah.
He'll definitely be there. Indeed.
The East-West, they'll go one and then the other. Mm-hmm. So East-West practices, I think, will start Saturday. So we might go Saturday, Sunday, Monday to the East-West and then over to Mobile.
And hopefully Ben Johnson will attend those too. I would imagine that is a possibility.
Or may not. He's going to be putting together a staff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the first thing he's got to do is get that thing all locked up.
Yeah, indeed. Let me see if there's a final question or two to end up in. Russell earlier said Washington was 4-13 last season. Is there any chance the Bears can duplicate that next season?
Why not?
Yeah, I agree. Well, and a lot, of course, depends on player acquisition. Is Poles going to hit on some of these draft picks and free agents? That's a huge part of it. But they got plenty of money.
I looked at Washington. They signed some free agents, and they weren't money guys.
Yeah.
They were, like Allegretti, who's a local kid, was a backup at Kansas City, started some games because of injury. He's a fixture at left guard for Washington. It's finding good guys that are going to, that are tough, competitive guys and that can fit what you want to do.
Yep, indeed. A couple of people, including Cliff, have talked about Jalen Carter looking really good in Philadelphia. And so
don't even go there with me because I'll there's no way this team could have drafted Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter would not be what he is in Philly.
Mm-hmm.
He would have been a disruption in the locker room. He's a freaking misfit. We talked about it when they drafted him. He went to the perfect team.
Yeah.
The team that somebody asked me about that the other day. I said, if this was 20 years ago and we got the players on the defensive line that we had and guys like Olin in the locker room, you can take him and he'll be fine because they'll kill him if he isn't.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I totally agree. A lot of people forget that this guy was involved, Jalen Carter was involved in an auto accident where he fled the scene of the accident. They didn't go back to check on his teammate who ultimately died in that crash. Secondly, at the combine, he ran out. He was not in shape. It's pro day.
Couldn't even complete it.
Couldn't even complete it. And, lawsuits coming up against him and so forth. He was just too troubled to take that chance on. And we were always complaining about the offensive line.
His talent was first or second in the draft, not ninth. He went ninth.
Yep.
Okay. And Philly had, and I said it then, I'll say it right now. Philly had the locker room to absorb him.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And when you got that, you can take guys like that.
Yep. And J2K says, what has Carter done that was so bad since being drafted? It doesn't matter. You're going on the information before the draft when you're evaluating him.
Well, I'll answer the question. You don't know because nobody's going to tell you.
Right.
He hasn't gotten in trouble. Okay. But how many times has he been fined?
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever. But nobody is taking a thing away from him as a football player. The guy's a hell of a football player.
Indeed.
It's the person. And, you look at who they had that one defensive lineman there for a long time. And
oh, yeah. Forgot his name. But
and Graham is still there. This is last year. Those guys were fixtures in that locker room and they were Pro Bowl players.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't fuck with them.
Yep, exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
And then you got guys like Lane Johnson on the offensive line. You had up until this year, you had Kelsey.
Mm-hmm.
Kelsey's like an Olin. You could bring Jalen Carter into your locker room because of those guys.
Right.
Okay,
Absolutely.
the Bears don't have that right now.
I agree. And, the thing is, it doesn't matter to me if Jalen Carter goes on to have a Hall of Fame type career. At the time, it was clear cut. We need offensive linemen. You're going to take a good high character guy. You're going to take a good high character player who worked out tremendously. They put him through, and then Carter didn't work out at all. He was running out of breath and so forth. At the time, it was the absolute best decision.
It was, but it was. Nobody questioned his talent. Everybody questioned what's going on up here.
Absolutely.
And when you look at the locker room, the Bears, and if that hasn't been fixed yet, no.
Right.
Okay. First thing, Ben Johnson. If I'm Ben Johnson, first thing I do, cut out all that shit in the locker room with these guys doing podcasts and everything else with people. Shut the fuck up.
I like that idea. Leave the podcasting to us, right, Greg?
Yeah. No, really. It's and the radio shows where they're flapping their jaws a little bit too much. There's stuff that stays in the locker room.
Yep. I also, a lot of people are a little bit down on Darnell Wright's performance. Yes, he has not played at a Pro Bowl level, but he's young and he could potentially get there pretty quick.
I'm real excited to see who the offensive line coach.
That's a big time hire.
That's the most important hire that he's got to make.
Yeah. There was a moment in the last game, and I don't know if the broadcast had recorded it earlier and then inserted it to make it seem like it was live, but it was right after a field goal, I believe, by the Lions, and we saw Ben Johnson on the sideline looking at his big Denny's menu play calling sheet and so forth, and I thought to myself, man, I hope if he's the head coach of the Bears, that's not what he's going to do. In between breaks, just be working on the offense.
His job was there.
Yeah, right. So I'm hoping he just doesn't, because he's going to call plays here in Chicago, right?
No question. But his job, he was doing his job.
Yeah.
And his job is, okay, this one's over now. What's what I'm doing the next? I'm thinking about the next series already.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do this, and this.
Yeah.
Now, the problem he had is in that game Saturday was Jared Goff reverted back to being Jared Goff.
Mm-hmm. Bears,
remember I said hit Jared Goff in the mouth and he sucks? What happened in that game?
Yep.
He got a helmet in the mouth and he sucked.
Oh, my God. That was such a vicious hit. I feel for Lions fans, especially those who are kind and fair-minded. Guys like Don Burr, who came in here and I had to ban him because he's talking so much shit. It finally got to my nerves. Those guys, I don't have any compassion for at all. You got what you deserve.
What was he bitching about?
He immediately started saying, Aaron Glenn sucks. I'm glad he's leaving Detroit. Ben Johnson and his stupid play calling and his trick plays, I'm glad he's gone. While during the season, he was bragging about them.
That's not a football fan.
No, exactly.
That's a front runner.
Yeah.
And, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. It's as simple as that, because that's nobody. I have questions about Ben Johnson. I've had them all along, and it's not Ben Johnson. It's he's a great coordinator. There's nobody taking that away from him. Can he lead a whole team? Mm-hmm. What's the guarantee? I kept saying, is there a guarantee?
Right.
There is no guarantee. So yeah, the only guy I think that you could say is that there's a little bit of a guarantee because he's done it was McCarthy.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
He's got the skins on the wall.
It's very true.
All the others were rolling the dice.
Yep.
Could he be LaFleur and could he be McVay? Shanahan? Yep.
Yep.
Will he? We'll find out real quick now because he's ours now.
He is ours. That is for sure. And we've got continuing coverage throughout the week on the hire and all the latest news. Maybe Greg and I will be back here if some big news about some of the coordinators and so forth. I know he'll reach
Well,
out
they
to me.
got to, with the coordinators, like I say, they got to go through the process.
Right.
So there's going to be that might take a little time before it's named.
Yeah. Okay. So you're thinking probably next week sometime?
I don't know. I mean, you literally got to go through the Rooney Rule stuff and all that.
That's right, because it includes coordinators, right?
Right. So you got to. What I'm saying is, and I hate saying this, but it's the truth. The guy's going to hire who he wants to hire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't matter. He in his mind, he doesn't have a Rooney Rule.
Right. I mean, hey, I'm getting a head coach job. I want this to work because I may not get another one.
Right.
And so I'm hiring the guy I want. Goddamn the rule. So, and it could be a person of color. We don't know. He knows who it is.
Right.
When I say Tanner, I'm guessing.
Yep.
But just based on Tanner's answers, because we've had two text conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, if you probably ask him, probably say, I want to be the real. If he came here, he's not the real OC. The head coach is the real OC.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If he gets elevated in Detroit, then he's the real OC.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure during that Zoom interview they had last weekend, he mentioned names to Poles and Warren and whoever else was in that search.
That's all part of it. Of course he did.
Yeah, and so they might have already started. The Bears might have started their own background searches on those guys, and hopefully he's got qualified names, and of course, Greg, myself, and I think 99.9% of Bears fans don't care what color or what background. Can he coach? Can he get us to the promised land and Super Bowl? That's the key.
I know he can coach offense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not worried about that. It's how is he going to be as a leader, and I'm not going to use that one phrase that I hate. So. And you know what that is. Leader of, we can't, dumbest phrase I ever heard.
Indeed. I can't believe that became like a T-shirt phrase for the Bears, leader of men. Come on. Anyway, that is it for Greg.
You got to have the respect. You got to have the respect of the entire team, not just the offensive side of the ball.
Do you think that was a shot by the Bears administration at Matt Eberflus because it ended up being proven that he wasn't an effective leader of men? Maybe he was for a while.
It could have been.
Yeah, it does seem to me like it was.
I before we came out, I did a couple of things, and I'm glad. There's a lot of people around here that owe Ryan Poles an apology.
Yeah, please tell us about that. Yeah.
That the abuse he has taken on social media since the season ended, really since the last third of the season, and the season ended, and that he's not, and then the bullshit that, Ben Johnson's got to have his own GM. And then people doubled down on that because the guy Newmark was going out to Vegas to, interview for that job. He's also interviewing for the Jets GM job. But how about this? I got my connections. Talked to 3 people. They all say the same thing. He's fucking lazy. He's not a grinder. You want that guy for your GM? Go ahead.
Hell no.
He's a politician. So, but was there any truth to it? Come on. Today's the first day he could talk. They didn't even talk in person. He got hired. This tells you that he knocked it out of the park when he interviewed 2 weeks ago, and they've been just waiting.
Mm-hmm. Hindsight being 2020, it does appear to me like it was and I was critical of how many names and stuff.
I was never
But
critical of that because
yeah, I knew you weren't. Yeah. But it does appear like he played this in a masterful way. And then to bring Eddie George in for a face-to-face to complete the Rooney Rule
yeah, but the
requirements.
only thing is I really hope, being that Kevin Warren is an African American, that Ryan Poles is
I
an
agree with you.
African American, that was not a scam.
I
If that
agree
was
with you.
a scam, that pisses me off.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Totally agree with
And
you.
it may not be. Maybe there is a spot for Eddie. Maybe Eddie. I like this coaching stuff. Because Eddie has done a hell of a job at Tennessee State.
Mm-hmm.
And Eddie, as a player, was one respected son of a gun now.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe that's a guy that Johnson brought in.
Right. Oh, great point. Great point. Yeah, absolutely. And Eddie George worked with the Bears last offseason, coaching running backs. He was part of the Bill Walsh Diversity Fellowship. And so they brought him and another African-American coach. They all got valuable time. And Matt Eberflus at that time said, we learned from Eddie as much as he learned from us. So there was a great two-way. And Eddie George will be coaching in the NFL soon. And it could be with the Bears.
Does he want to do that?
Yeah.
That's the key, is if he wants to, because people say, well, why doesn't Olin coach?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Olin wants to coach because of the time commitment.
Yeah.
Olin's kids are playing in Illinois. He likes to go do that. Do you think he can go to every one of their games if he's coaching? Nope.
Mm-hmm.
No, he's over at Carmel Catholic and Mundelein coaching, and he can do it then.
Yep. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. All right, everybody, we will be back here tomorrow. We might even do a show tonight. I know Aaron Current reached out to me, but that Notre Dame game is on tonight. Who do you got, Greg?
Oh, I want Notre Dame. I'll be timid like I was against Penn State. I didn't think they matched up good against Penn State.
Yeah, me too.
And then they beat them. So, Notre Dame is hurt in some key areas. Their left tackle's out, who was a true freshman. But here's the oddity. The guy who's going back in is the guy that was supposed to be there all year. He tore a pec muscle during training camp.
Wow.
And so he has to sit. He played the bowl game. He was a starter in a bowl game last year against Oklahoma. Or no, who they play? Oregon State. And then he was supposed to be the left tackle this year. He's a big guy. State wrestling champ from out in the Triple Cities area, Western Illinois.
Okay.
And big guy, 6'7", 325, real athletic. So he gets hurt. So they put this true freshman who was supposed to be a guard and at left tackle. And he played really well. But now they're putting this guy comes back. He played over half the game at right guard last week against Penn State. So now they put him back where he's supposed to be to begin with. So that'll be interesting to see how he plays.
Mm-hmm.
That'll help because he's got the size and the length.
Yep. I understand
that position. And then, they lost Riley Mills, and that was a big Riley Mills is, he's probably maybe a late day 3, early day 4, or late day 2, early day 3 guy in the NFL draft. But for them, he was a hell of a player.
Mm-hmm. Aaron just posted he forgot about the title game with the Ben Johnson use, but Barfly Tailgate Show is going to start in an hour. So tune in, people, to get the reaction from Aaron and the rest of the guys from the Tailgate Show. Greg, absolutely stellar. Thanks for reaching out and doing this. By the way, I too was taking a nap during the news.
Hey, stay on for a second. I just want to ask you one thing.
You got it. So everyone, we'll see you very soon, and stick around for the Tailgate Show. Bye-bye, everybody.